What's going on? It's Brandon Styles and welcome to 2020, a new year, got some new videos coming out. Today we're going to start something new and we are going to be breaking down the design of famous home pages. So today we're going to be breaking down the Stripe online payments website. A lot of times I'll have clients who get a design back and they're like, maybe we want it to kind of be like the Stripe website. And so we'll design something up, send it back, and they're like, it's not quite what I'm looking for, but then they can't just talk about why. I know it's not right, but I don't know how to make it right. So I'm gonna show you how you can take a website like Stripe and how you can use certain design motifs and fonts in there to create your own site or homepage just like it. We're also gonna talk about the purpose of the page, why Stripe is doing certain things, how they make everything look designed and cohesive. So check it out, it's a long video. Sit back with a cup of coffee and I hope you enjoy. All right, let's break down this design. So today we're gonna be looking at 4 different elements to this Stripe homepage. We're gonna be looking at the design motifs, like what are the repeating patterns that we see. We're gonna take a look at the fonts. What are they doing with headlines, body copy, things like that. What are they doing with spacing and layout? And then we're gonna be looking at the page purpose and the section purposes, like what are the calls to action that Stripe is wanting us to take. So let's clear off all of these and let's just start with this design motif right here. All right, here's our design motifs section isolated. And the first thing I like to do before really getting into the nitty-gritty of breaking down a home page is kind of just look at the general design and see if I can see any patterns right off the bat. So I'm going to bring out a little Google Doc here. Now looking at this page as a whole, what are some of the design motifs that we see? So I see green, seems to be like a repeating color. Looks like they've got that in the call to action. There's flat design with the icons, right? And they're green as well. So with icons, it's kind of a flat design. And overall, the page has kind of a playful feel, right? We can see over here, there's kind of these jagged edges and these angles. And we're also overlapping right here. See how this image overlaps this section right here? All right, so we've kind of got some angled sections and edges, and then we've also got some overlapping. And the overlapping creates depth. So see this iPad that's crossing over these two sections creates a little bit of depth. You can see the drop shadows back there. Also use of drop shadows. Now these drop shadows are fairly light, and it's kind of that modern approach to drop shadows where you're probably using 2 shadows, right? Like an actual cast shadow and then a drop shadow. Creates a little bit more depth. It's like what Apple does. Shallow drop shadows to create depth. And that's a good start, I think. Overall, the page looks really modern, minimalistic. Let's kind of go back here and take off these notes that we've been having. Let's zoom in and break down this first section. Again, we're looking at the design motifs only. All right, so let's look at this top section right here. So one thing we're seeing right now is these buttons. A lot of times clients will not be able to articulate exactly what they don't like about the design of their page. So I'm going to show you how to do that. The first thing I'm looking at is kind of the overall roundedness of this. So a lot of the elements in here have kind of a rounded off edge, which is going to give you a more playful look versus like right angle edges, which are a little bit more professional, right? So see what I mean? So see there's like a rounded edge right here. The buttons kind of have a rounded edge. Obviously there's a rounded edge right here on the icons. And then if you scroll down, everything's just kind of rounded off with a border radius, right? It's around there, it's around there. And all that roundness is going to make for a little bit more of a playful design. That's kind of the first thing that I'm going to be looking at. Now let's look at how they do these buttons. So right here, you've got 2 buttons. Now this is going to be your main call to action button right here. And we can tell that because it's what they would want us to do, right? If someone's going to the Stripe page, what is the #1 action Stripe's going to want us to take? It's going to be to sign up for their product or start, all right? Now this one right here is a secondary action. And you can tell because it's a white button. It doesn't quite stick out to you as much as this green right here. So this is what we call a second class action. It's not the first class action, which is the start now. This is where they're going to make their money right here, right? The second one is inviting a conversation. So it's not a sell, it's not a sign up, it is just a conversation, all right? So this is going to be our second class action, and this is going to be our first class action. The next thing we want to look at is right here. So here's another button. This is what I call a third class action. This doesn't really have a lot to do with the page. It's not going to initiate a conversation. Let's put a 3 right here. It's not going to necessarily make a sale. This is more information, okay? So if we come over here in our first class action, it's going to be start now, and it's going to be solid green background, and it's going to be all caps, right? The start now is all caps. All these buttons are going to be all caps, all right? So let's kind of add that to the button motif. So these buttons are all caps. They're also slightly rounded to give a little playful feel. And the tracking on the letters, which is the space between the letters, is kind of normal, right? It's not very tight, not very loose. So I'm going to call it normal tracking. All right, cool, so we're putting that together. So this is gonna be our first class action. Our second class action, which is, hey, if you're still not convinced, then at least give us a call. So contact sales. And the second class actions are gonna have the white background, and that's what separates them. Finally, our third class action, which is, well, damn, if there's nothing else, at least just look at what we've got. This is gonna be kind of our more info button, right? That's gonna be these up here, these little new pills, all right? And we'll probably see some more of these as we go along. Now in the background of this, you've got a gradient and you've got this angled section. So I'm going to, in this hero section, we're going to notice that there is kind of a gradient being used. And this is an interesting contrast because everything else is rounded, but right now you've got these sharp angled images, or these sharp angled sections, and kind of these sharp geometric shapes in the background. So creates a nice little contrast. It's not too crazy of a gradient. So we're using the gradient, and we're using a little bit of a background texture. And notice the texture here. These are those angled sections, all right? So this angled right here, and then angled right here. So these angles, let's do overall motifs. Those are those angled sections right here. I'm gonna put +1 right here for those, all right? That's nice. And finally, let's look at this last thing right here. We have these illustrations, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And they've all got kind of the same look to them, right? They've all got that rounded kind of flatter, very minimalistic feel, right? There's no buttons here. Usually on an iPad, you'd see like a home button here or something like that. They're rounded off maybe a little bit more than the actual product, and they're only a couple of colors, right? This one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors. All right, I like to write how many colors there are right here so we kind of know what we're dealing with. This one's probably about the same, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 colors, all right? So we're not dealing with a lot there. And the same for here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we don't really count these logos because it's just a logo. So really we're, maybe just dealing with 5 colors. All right, so we're kind of keeping with minimal design on illustrations, 4 to 7 colors. By doing this, we're coming up with a theme and figuring out how to get the design we want. So if we wanted to get this stripe look, we can use some of these motifs. All right, so let's move on from the hero section. We're going to be looking at this next section, which is right here. Again, we've got this kind of angled feel right here, right? There's the angled section. So let's do another like +2 for that. And then we're using that flat icon. All right, so flat icons right there. Let's give a +1 for that, so we're looking good. Again, we've got some of this overlapping going on right here, right? So we're overlapping the sections and creating depth, which is kind of a modern look. Now let's look right here. Here's another one of those third class actions right here. So notice this isn't even a button. This is just a line of text basically. But we know that it's a link because it's a little bit different. Let's scroll in a little bit. Because it's going to be a different color, it's a little bit bolder than the copy and not as bold as the headline right here. And also you've got an icon right here which generally means, go somewhere. So in our third class actions, we're going to see really just a little bit bolder text, and we're going to use a directional icon. So that's kind of a motif we might see. Let's kind of scroll down to this next one right here. Whoa, going a little crazy here on the Photoshop. So next up, we've got this section right here. We're going to be using kind of a muted background, right? This is kind of a cool gray background. So maybe we'll see that again. later on. Again, we've got this flat icon right here. So let's give another design to the flat icon. And again, we're seeing just some of these same motifs. We're seeing these rounded corners. Let me zoom in a little bit here. We're seeing roundedness right here. Here's another one of those third class actions. All right, so we've got another +1 right here for the third class actions. Again, with the icon to illustrate going somewhere. And this is kind of an illustration. Again, it's a simple illustration, right? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 colors. So really minimal illustrations. We're using that green, so we're seeing that green repeated again, which is right here in our overall thing. And it's against a neutral background. But also look at this background right here. Notice how it kind of it's gray, but it kind of pulls green, right? Like if you were to say, hey, this can't be gray or white, what color would you say this was out of the, kind of popular colors? You would say it kind of pulls a little green. So it kind of fits in with this icon right here. Let's keep going down. We're gonna see the same thing, right? We're gonna see those rounded off flat icons, really minimal design, right? These are kind of monochromatic designs with 3 colors, this green right here, this green and this green. They're flat. Here's another one of those third class actions right here and right here. So again, we're kind of starting to see the motifs that pop up, really just kind of using these overall designs right here. Here we've kind of got that typical section. This is going to be your social proof section. This is going to be to try and convince people, hey, we've worked with, we work with some big guys. Hope you work with us next. Again, right here, we've got that repeat of this single background pattern. This one's not as green, so this one doesn't pull green. You can see if you compare these two, this one definitely pulls green, and this one is more of that gray. But that's kind of cool, right? It almost pulls blue in a way, but that matches nicely with this blue right here, and it matches nicely with this purple right here. So that is probably why they made that design decision. And again, you're kind of seeing this purple fit in as a secondary color, right? There's a purple there, kind of a purple gradient there. There's another gradient. So kind of your secondary color is going to be that purple. And then kind of your tertiary color, which means third, is going to kind of be that gray, all right? And we're seeing that when they want us to take an action, they're usually using a green, like a big action is going to be in the green. And then the tertiary actions, or the secondary actions, are going to be the purple. Not always the case, right? This is kind of a first class action. This is the start now. And then the contact sales again keeping with that second class action right here of the white background. And then we're going to kind of just see this purple again, just to kind of stand out from this black right here. So a common trick that you'll see, separating 2 lines, keeping one a secondary color, and then the black. So that's kind of the design motif breakdown of the page. So we're seeing a lot of these angled sections, overlapping. Again, that all means just modern. It's super modern in design right now to have these angled sections and this overlapping. We've got really minimalistic illustrations and icons, and we've got some gradient. Notice all the vibrant colors. So you've got this kind of like electric blue all coming through here. And you've got kind of this really energizing green right here. And then you've got this kind of energizing gradient. So all these colors are going to be really energizing, right? It's not like a dull fall colored brown or like a dark drabby gray. These are all like really energizing colors and gradients. So that's just going to give you kind of more of an energetic feel, and that makes sense for Stripe, right? Usually with banking apps, they're going to be a little bit more formal. You're going to see a lot more right angles and straight edges, but Stripe is one of those kind of modern, almost startups, right? You don't think of Stripe as being for like older people and all this stuff. It's kind of a younger platform. So you get this more of a jokey, modern look, more of a fun look, all right? And real quick, before we jump out of this design motif, let's take a look at the drop shadows. So drop shadows you're going to use to imply depth in a design, right? And the darker the shadow, then kind of the closer it's going to be to the human, right? So see how this shadow right here is pretty dark, like right around these edges, it's pretty dark, and then it kind of flattens out a little bit. That means that this element in a perspective is going to feel closer than this element, and it's going to feel even closer than this element. See, there's like a little drop shadow down here, but this phone does not feel as close as this little card right here. little kind of tight shadows on everything. Like right, like here is kind of a little tight shadow. There's not a lot of spread, whereas this one, there's a lot of spread. Like it kind of comes out to like right here, and then you've also got like a tiny little shadow. So you're almost using two shadows in there, which is a kind of modern thing to do as well. And then finally in these buttons, you've also got little tiny shadows to indicate depth, right? So you can see in this one, if we scroll in really tight, sorry, it gets a little blurry, you can see that there's one little tiny shadow like right here, and then that there's another blurry shadow right here. Okay, so they're using two shadows all to give out depth. One thing it's not doing is you're not seeing that kind of like little purplish glow around here. That's a very modern look, is to kind of have the same color, almost a glowing effect behind a button, but you don't see that here. So those are the design motifs for the Stripe page. Now let's go into the fonts. We're going to check out the fonts that Stripe is using and kind of what they're doing with those. So first of all, let's go to stripe.com and let's see which font they're using. It's really this sans serif font right here. Looks like kind of the only one they're really doing. Also, we've got some animation here on the actual website, which is cool. Kind of draws attention with the spinning gears. So I'm going to use this plugin right here to see what kind of font. It's called Camphor, and then or Camphor maybe, and then the backup one is Open Sans, which we see a lot, and then a Sego UI, and then sans serif right there. So really, they've just got this one font that they're using. So let's kind of break down what they're doing. Let's scroll in right here. The first thing I'm looking at is this navigation right here, these links. So there's sentence case, right? Capital letter and then lowercase. The tracking on them looks normal, like they're not super tight. It looks kind of just like how the font would look in the first place. And that's it. Given pretty good padding between each of these right here, looks nice. And then finally, look at this. So this is one of those tertiary call to actions right here. It's a sign in. But it's just not emphasized because the purpose of this page is not to get people to sign in, right? It's to get them to start. This is a sales page essentially. So this is a tertiary action. It's got that same kind of icon that we're used to seeing for a tertiary action. But this button is for people that Stripe has already compelled to buy into their product. So let's look at this headline. So this is going to be their H1 right here. This is going to be like the main headline that does all the heavy lifting, right? It's the first thing that people see when they get to the site. It's sentence case, right? There's only this one capital letter. The tracking on it is actually a little bit loose. You see I can kind of get like my whole brush mark in here. So it's kind of loose tracking versus sometimes what you would see like down here. It's a little bit tighter tracking. See, there's just not enough space, not a lot of space between these paragraphs. It's just really legible, but it's not super big, right? A lot of times in the Apple website now, you'll see the fonts that they might be this high and they're just really bold and kind of that brutalist design, but not this one. This one's just kind of your standard, maybe 48 pixel font. Then let's go down to this one. You'll see that this is a white font for the body copy, but it's not all white. It's kind of a lower opacity white. So that's a very common trick. So like, let's say with this font right here, it is the normal white. And this one might be white with an opacity of maybe 0.8%. So you're taking just a little opacity out. But it makes this headline jump out and it makes this kind of sit back, right? This is secondary content compared to this, the new standard in online payments. Something else that I like about this is that you're seeing probably we want to stay between 30 and 50 characters in a line just to make it readable. With this body copy, and we're definitely hitting that, right? There's 3, and there's probably about 30 to 50 characters in here. It's just really easy to read. You'll also see the line height is pretty tall. It's pretty generous, and that makes it easy for us to jump from internet over to business, from forward over to thinking, and it just makes it easy to read. And then finally, the fonts for the buttons. The button fonts are all going to be capital, and they are normally spaced, not in too tight, not in too wide. And you're going to see kind of this, it's basically centered in there. And there's generous padding around the buttons. Not a lot, not a little. Down here is kind of what I would call the H2. And this is going to be kind of like what draws your attention the most, right? Like this is, after the images, this is where your eye is drawn right here. So what they're doing, let's see, for their H1 fonts, their main fonts, they're doing sentence case. and they're doing a wide tracking, right? The letters are far apart, but it's not too tall. Like it's just a medium large, let's call it, font size. And then kind of for the body, what they're doing is an opaque, is it opaque white, I guess? And they're doing a high line height. Remember to make it easy to jump down to the next line. And then there's also type tracking. Like those letters are pretty close together, but it's very readable fonts. And then just the overall font is sans serif, which means it's not like Times New Roman where it's got like little flourishes that come out. It is sans, like it's just kind of straight lettering. And you'll see that it's a little bit more of a modern look is the sans serif fonts like Helvetica, Arial, things like that. Now, if we scroll out real quick, also let's look at what they're doing with the font alignment. So right here, we've got a left align. And then right here, we've got a right align. Here, we've got center alignment. And then the rest is pretty much left aligned, right? Left align there, here, here, and here. So mostly left aligned, a little middle, and a little right align. You don't see right align a lot, but used properly, it can kind of give it a little bit more of a modern look, right? Because it's a little strange. Like this is the only instance that they use the right aligned type right here, but it kind of just, it makes it sit out a little bit and it gets out of the way of these elements. All right, so let's zoom back in. So again, for this H2 section right here, it is going to be all caps. We're using that familiar green that Stripe's been using. Pretty good line height, right? There's a generous line height between these two lines. So let's call it a high line height. The letters are just kind of medium tracking. They're not too close together. Gives it room to breathe. And also it's not a very thick weight, right? This might be a semi-bold weight, but honestly it looks just like a regular font weight. It's not bold. And what they're doing there is they're not using size to differentiate between the icons. So check out what I mean. So you notice this H2, this body copy, and even this tertiary action right here, they're all fairly similar in size, right? There's not a lot of pixel difference between here. This might be, let's say, 18, maybe a 16 here, and then maybe a 16 here too. So that goes to show you don't have to use font size to differentiate between actions. Sometimes it makes the design more interesting to play around with font weight, with colors, things like that. So they're relying on color right here to separate these three elements versus font size and things like that. Back down here, we've got the same thing going on. We've got the green H2. Then it looks like we've got a little bit darker body copy, but again, it's essentially black, but just with the opacity taken down. It's center aligned, but you still got the typical, you got the high line height, tight tracking, things like that with the body copy that lines up. Scrolling down, you got a little bit of the same thing. So again, here's the H2s. So these are going to be our second most important calls to read, right? So if I'm just scrolling down this page, the first thing I see besides the headlines is I'm reading the green stuff. All right, so it's a complete toolkit for a business. It's developer first. It's always improving, global scale. These are the things that are pushing you towards clicking this button, start now. So it's like developer first. All right, that's not enough to convince me. It's always improving. Not enough. It's global scale. All right, fine. I'm going to start now. So that's the purpose of this page, which we'll get into in a little bit, is getting people to click a Start Now button. And then finally down here, we've kind of got a little bit different thing, right? We've got a little bit different headline. This is kind of it's at the bottom of the page. It's almost like an H4 in a way. And you've got two different colors here. Honestly, that kind of just depends on personal preference for the different colors. I think it creates a little contrast and breaks up a lot of that green to use this blue right here, these two blue elements. But we're still seeing that tertiary action, right? We've still got the different colored font right here, and then we've still got this little icon right here that tells us to go to another page. And then finally, we kind of see, it's a little bit like the H1 right down here at the bottom. It's a final call to action. Like if you're still not convinced, if you got all the way down here without being convinced, here's one more try to get you kind of roped in. And then finally, let's go down to the footer. Here you're going to see exactly what I was talking about with not having to rely on font size to differentiate elements, right? This product is basically the same height as payments right here, but they made it all caps and they have used a sentence case for the footer items and a little bit less weight, right? This might be a regular font weight, whereas this is more like a semi-bold. But again, high tracking here so that you can easily tell what's going on. They're a little bit toned down so that they don't stick out, because this is not the most important part of the page. The most important part, if you blur your eyes, you're going, especially on this section, you're going to see these green buttons, which are going to draw you to features, and then you're going to see this purple button, which is the main call to action. All right, so that's kind of what we're looking at for fonts. Now let's move into the third of four breakdowns, and let's look at the spacing and what they're doing with the spacing here. All right, breaking down the spacing and the layout of the Stripe homepage. With this kind of stuff, it's good if you can to do like a full screen screen capture, just so that you can kind of get a bird's eye view of what's going on. Sometimes, like when you're in close and you're scrolling like over here, it's hard to get the exact feel of the whole page, and you can't always figure out why stuff is working and why it feels good, blah, blah, blah. So it really does help to scroll out a little bit. So let's look at the layouts and the spacing for the Stripe page. So the first thing I'm looking at right here in the hero image is we have got kind of this 2/3 section right here, and then we kind of have this like 1/3 space right here. All right, and then this is where obviously the headline is the main kind of call to action. This is that F shape that you see a lot in web design, right? People start reading here, and then they start here, and then they're used to looking here, and then they go down. See how that looks kind of like an F shape right there? So you see this a lot in design right now. And now notice how everything stays within pretty much the container of the navigation, right? So if we just draw a straight line down here, everything's pretty much within those bounds. And then if we draw a straight line here, you'll also see everything on the page is within those bounds as well. So we've got lots of breathing room on the sides, and everything's not, you know, way out to the margins and the boundaries right here. So that's pretty cool. Finally, with this, we can kind of see that we've cut some things down the middle with this stripe design, right? So a lot of 50-50 splits. So here's a 50% box right here, and then here's another 50% box right here. We've got the same thing right here, and then we've got the same thing right here, and we've even got the same thing right here and right here. So it's kind of a motif that we're seeing. Now this developer's first thing breaks it up a little bit, right? So we've kind of got the one single centered box, which actually, if you look at it, is about 50%. It's like 50% moved to the center. And then right here, we've got the 2/3, 1/3 thing that we see at the top. So, and then again, right here, it's the 50% and then 50% right here. So really, we're just seeing two types of patterns. We're seeing like a 2/3 split, 1/3 split, and then past that we're really just seeing half split containers that are all centered based on the navigation if you look down. Even the footer's like that, right? The footer keeps containment between the navigational beacons, so to speak. So that's interesting to see. We're also seeing a lot of spacing. Let's kind of clear out of those. We're also seeing some good spacing and consistent spacing between these sections, right? So right here, you've got, you know, about 108 pixels or so. And then to the bottom of the graphic, to the bottom of the section, you've got about 65. And then right here, this should be about the same. Yeah, about 65. And then let's see, this might be 65 too. Yeah, it's about 65 right there. So you're seeing consistent spacing in between these things. And just between the section tops as a whole. So really this is all just consistent spacing, right? If we move a line here, that's about 47 pixels tall, but then if we move it down, we'll see that it also fits in right there, which is great. And then we'll probably see this repeating pattern, not really right there, but maybe it's right here. There you go. So see, you're seeing a lot of this repeat alignment all throughout, maybe even right here too between, yeah, see, almost right there too. So a good tip is to take the kind of the same spacing here. See, the spacing here is the same as the spacing here, the same as the spacing here, the same as the spacing here. That's another good trick for making your designs look cohesive, is establishing, it kind of follows the Tailwind CSS markup of kind of establishing just a few different margins and paddings for your elements. So maybe that box that we've been looking at, that was about this tall, that would be one of your consistent spacing. And it just makes things look designed. That's how you can make things look nice and designed. Really, to this page, there's not a lot going on with the layouts. It's just a bunch of like half splits and then some 2/3 splits thrown in there. Here and there. Remember, this is like a 2/3 split right here, right? There's 2/3 of the page width, and then there's 1/3 right here to separate it. All right, so the layout's not super complicated, and the footer here kind of almost mirrors, the footer being right here, almost mirrors this navigation up here, right? It's kind of got that off to the side, and then all the contents here, and then this thing here is kind of the same thing, right? Kind of logo-y pop thing here, and then the rest of the content fills it out. So that is basically the layout for this. Also, look, there's a lot of spacing between these elements right here, which is good. It gives these buttons room to breathe so that your eyes go there. Like if you were to take these and you were to, let's say, move them over, not only would it not look right, but it just looks like it doesn't stick out near as much as if these buttons are over here. So lots of spacing and air given to all of these elements, right? There's plenty of space everywhere to go around, and that's a good tip for designing your pages is start with a lot of white space, and you can always go tighter if you need to, but it's hard to take a design and widen it out once you've made it a certain tightness. Okay, so always err on the side of white space and close in later if it doesn't look right. Finally, let's go into the actual purpose of this page and what it's doing. This is the most important part, and this is honestly where you should start when you're designing a home page. The design is cool, but you could have the coolest design in the world, and if you're not getting sales, if you're not getting downloads, you're not getting purchases, it doesn't matter. So let's go into what this page is actually trying to accomplish and why. In the home stretch of this design breakdown. So when we're designing a page, any page on a website, we want to ask what's the purpose, all right? The home page of any website, most of the time, is to sell a product, sell a service, something like that. So this page was built so that people could navigate to it, they could read about Stripe and learn about it and say, hey, I want to join and I want to start using Stripe so that they can make money. So we're trying to think of our target market, and we're trying to think of what would they want to hear, or what would they want to read, what would they want to see that would excite them enough to sign up for Stripe. So overall, we want people to sign up. And if they're not ready to sign up, we want to give them a second class action, which in this case is contact sales. And then finally, if they're still not convinced, then we want to give them a tertiary third class action, which in this case is just more info. And you can see more info, let's put that in quotes, scattered around this page, right? Discover how businesses use Stripe, that's more info. Learn about Stripe's products, more info. More about us, more info. All right, so that's kind of hey, if you're not convinced yet, read a little bit more about us, because the more people read, then the more likely they are to decide whether or not they want to work with you. So the purpose of this page is to get people to sign up for Stripe. Now let's break down what they're doing section by section to accomplish that. So here is the first kind of hero section right here. Let's start by kind of scratching out the navigation, and then let's kind of X out the footer, because these are things kind of like the legal statements on a website where you just kind of have them in there. Like this is honestly a more info section, and then this is just a navigational section. They're still really important to the UI in terms of a cohesive design, but they're not really trying to accomplish anything in terms of the page purpose, which is to sell. So right now, this section is kind of establishing who Stripe is, the new standard in online payments, right? So it's saying, hey, the new standard, everyone's using this, it's new, that gets people excited and wants to bring them in. Stripe is the best software platform for running an internet business. We handle billions of dollars every year for forward-thinking businesses around the world, right? So they're establishing credibility here. Billions of dollars every year. That means people are using them, all right? The best software platform. And then this is kind of tribe talk, right? Forward-thinking businesses around the world. So that's kind of saying, hey, if you're new, or if you're an early adapter, or if you like trying, taking risks, you're a new breed of businessman, of business person, then Stripe is for you. They're also trying to establish a little credibility, right? This is not a new company. They've done billions of dollars. And then that's really it. And then they have the calls to action, the first class call to action, and the second class. Now let's look over here at the pictures. So pictures are interesting. These are showing you kind of who uses Stripe. And this is social proofing in and of itself. Like down here, we've got some social proofing with the logos. All right, if we come up here, we're essentially getting that icon section, but in a little bit more of a creative way, right? We can see DigitalOcean. We can see that Slack uses it. Asana uses it. Postmates, things like that. So this is social proof in and of itself, but also kind of relying on other people's designs, right? Here's the Asana design with the gradient and all that to get people excited. So that's kind of cool. It's like letting other designers design for you with this while still providing social proof. Let's go into this complete toolkit section right here. So we've still got these images that I'm going to say are part of this section, but really all we've got here is this area right here, complete toolkit for internet businesses. So again, it's setting up that internet business thing. So this is for online payments for internet businesses. All right, and then let's give that a +1 because we just saw it again. All right, so that's the theme that's kind of popped up. Builds the most powerful and flexible tools for internet commerce. Okay, so honestly, here too, probably a little SEO, right? They're like, we want to rank for internet commerce. We want to rank for online payments, things like that. Whether you're creating a subscription service, all right, so this is kind of calling out to you online entrepreneurs, an on-demand marketplace, e-commerce store, crowdfunding, Stripe's meticulously designed APIs and unmatched functionality help you create the best possible product for your users. Millions of the world's most innovative technology companies are scaling faster and more efficiently by building their businesses on Stripe. So again, man, they're doubling down on this online business thing, which makes sense because that's what it's about. And again, they're doubling down, so let's give it a +2 for the new breed of business person, right? Crowdfunding, innovative, scaling, all those types of kind of entrepreneurial terms that you hear tossed around in startups. So that's what's going on here. And again, it's the complete toolkit for internet businesses. So it's kind of doubling down on exactly what this said. So we're starting to get an idea of, okay, what this page could be for, right? It's all trying to get us to click that Start Now button. So let's go down to developers first now, all right? This gray section right here. Okay, so this one is talking about developers. So maybe it's lower down on the page, so maybe this is where developer gets to. Entrepreneurs, they probably stop here. This is for the developers. So someone like me could be reading this and this would be interesting. Payments is a problem rooted in code, not finance. So this one's about code. So this one is speaking to the developers. So this is almost like a secondary market speaking to developers, right? Because developers are probably going to recommend a payment system for their clients. And you can also see the language they're using is speaking to developers. Like probably most entrepreneurs aren't going to know what a composable abstraction is or scalable, flexible integrations and things like that, extraneous details. You're using a lot more complex terminology right here. And you're also showing the code and you're showing how easy it is, right? You can work with Stripe basically just by doing these 4 lines of code are how you initiate a transaction. And then here you've got where you can click other options, so how to do payments, how to work with customers, how to code for subscriptions and things like that. So this one's speaking to the secondary market right here, which is developers, and showing them how easy it is. Also, it's trying to just show you how easy things are, right? You can create a transaction in essentially 10 lines of code. So that's what this section is trying to do. It's trying to get developers to sign up and learn more. Finally, let's go to this last little section right here. 2 sections, I guess. Let's go to this last one right here. So this one is, we're getting towards the bottom of the page. So usually you're thinking, hey, if people aren't sold now, they might not be sold this time around. But you just want to give a little bit more information keeping with the theme, right? We've got this like 50% wide section right here and this 50% wide section right here. It's always improving. That's good for entrepreneurs and developers, so it speaks to both. And global scale. So that kind of, again, attacks both the business person, entrepreneur, and the developers. Stripe is an always improving tool chain that gains new features every month. Our world-class engineering. So again, this is some of that social proof. Constantly iterates upon every facet, from Apple Pay to Alipay for Alibaba, I guess. Building on Stripe means you get early access to the latest technology. So again, that's doubling down on this new breed of business person, right? You get new technologies, world-class engineering, take the risk, we're worth it, we can scale to fit your every need. We help power millions of businesses in 100 plus countries. Again, all day, that's social proofing. So we're trying to keep social proofing. We've had a number of these. Let's give that a plus 3. And then we can go ahead and count it 4 times, right? That's just using those logos. They're saying, hey, these people trusted us, so can you too. So let's add a plus 4, get that out of the way. Headquartered in San Francisco, Stripe has 14 global offices and hundreds of people working to help transform how modern businesses are run. Again, we're just doubling down on modern business, doubling down on social proofing. Finally, let's get to this last section, which is, I'm kind of counting it as this right here until the footer cuts off. Recurring payments, send invoices, manage subscriptions, and reduce payment declines with Stripe's recovery tools. And then payments for platforms gives platforms and marketplaces the tools to support multi-party payments and get sellers in 25 countries paid. So right, these are kind of like the least interesting things, and that's probably why they're at the bottom of the page. This is kind of the last gasp to like say, hey, buy from us. And then finally, it's just a kind of a soft call to action, ready to get started, get in touch, or create an account. So basically this is saying, all right, enough funny business, either get in touch or create an account. And this just echoes, again, that first call action, that first class action, and that second class action. So that is the purpose of the page. We are focusing on online entrepreneurs, and we're focused on developers. And this whole page is put together to show them how easy it is to use this and how other people are doing it, so you should hop on the bandwagon. So that's the breakdown of the Stripe pages, the Stripe homepage. Again, so if we scroll out, we can kind of see what they're all doing. So take this and learn from it. So now if you're trying to recreate a page like Stripe, you kind of know what to look for. So like here are some of the things that you could put to get a website that looks and feels kind of like Stripe. Overall takeaway from this, just using the energetic colors, so the orange gradients, the deep blue gradients, the green, and then keeping things really simple and using lots of space. Hopefully that was helpful. Let me know what you think. Let me also know if there's another homepage you want me to break down, and I will pull it up and do the same thing. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you like this content, and I'll talk to you soon. I'm Brandon Stiles.